Morning, everyone. I would like to call the June 10th, 2026 meeting of the Essex Park Housing Authority meeting to order. It is 8:30. And I'd like to call the meeting to order. Is there approval for amendments to the agenda?
Question.
Yes, sir.
Under action items, Scott, does number 4 relate back to number 9 under discussion items, or do we need to list what it is we intend to discuss?
So yes, to both of those inquiries. It relates back to executive session, and I know we may have action items coming out of executive session. The items to be discussed in executive session, which action items might pertain to, is listed.
Okay.
under item.
I just didn't want it to be an undisclosed subject.
Anything else? Consider motion to approve the minutes. Pardon me, to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second. Motion of second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. I have a couple of announcements to make here this morning before we get to public comments. Last week, the last meeting, I called for comments. Then if there were any questions in dealing with the last item that was discussed, my asking for questions from the board or the liaisons, not the public comment. That's the reason that I refuse to take questions from the public for here. Public comments are at the beginning of the meeting, or if we have an action item that we take a vote on, then there's an opportunity for public comments for that. So I apologize for any misinterpretation of that. It's called out as being rude and not a very nice person. And I wanted to clarify the discussion items for the call questions. That being said, public comments. Yes, Seneca.
Good morning. My name is Anne Copeland, and as you know, I'm a Vista Ridge homeowner. As I understand it, this review was in response to multiple Vista Ridge homeowners raising concerns, including through the restorative justice process, about how the existing deed restriction is being interpreted and applied. Because the deed restriction review is now listed as an action item, I'm here to ask the board to clearly review the interpretive question under the existing deed restriction before giving direction on a new or replacement formula. The unresolved interpretive question is this: what does market value mean under the recorded deed restriction? What valuation problems the appraiser being asked to solve? And where does the text authorize the current method? At the May meeting, Director Moulton acknowledged the ambiguity in the deed restrictions valuation language and acknowledged that the current applied structure may create a form of double counting. The appraiser accounts for the restriction that EPHA applies the 50% appreciation on top of that restricted value. That acknowledgement matters. If the current methodology may discount homeowner appreciation twice, then I believe the board should first be shown where the recorded deed restriction authorizes that result. I also understand that staff has expressed there may not be an administrative path forward under the existing deed, but I believe there is still an opportunity for a program-wide board-level review of the deed restriction interpretation. EPHA has already made interpretive choices under the deed restriction that affect how the resale formula is applied. The January letter states that absent a contemporaneous purchase date appraisal, EPHA uses the owner's original purchase price as the baseline proxy for market value at the time of purchase. To me, that looks like an interpretive substitution rather than a straightforward application of the deed restriction. If EPHA can make that substitution, then the board should be shown why the homeowner submitted interpretation of market value grounded in the deed's own language is treated as unavailable. A future deed restriction rewrite may be an appropriate long-term policy discussion, but that does not resolve the interpretation question under the current deed restriction. Before the board gives direction on a new or replacement formula, I respectfully ask that the board complete an interpretive review that identifies 6 things. First, the deed restriction language being interpreted. Second, EPHA's current applied interpretation. Third, the homeowner submitted interpretation reflected in the Vista Ridge petition. Fourth, the textual and appraisal rationale for each interpretation. Fifth, the practical effect of each interpretation. And sixth, staff and council's explanation of what can be decided administratively and what requires board level direction. I don't expect this to be resolved today, but if the board takes action, I respectfully ask that it be limited to 1 step. Initiate a board level interpretive review of the existing deed restriction. Homeowners should then have a defined opportunity to respond in writing to that interpretive review before the board gives any further direction on a new or replacement formula. I thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
My name is Elaine Hunt Downey, and I live in an affordable Vista Ridge condo at 874 Crabapple Lane. I purchased my unit new in 2004 and have lived there almost 22 years. I am grateful that an affordable homeownership program exists in Estes Park, and I continue to support its mission and future success. To briefly summarize how we arrived at this point, in July 2025, 86% of affordable homeowners signed and submitted a petition requesting that the Housing Authority use a true market value appraisal, consistent with a common understanding of market value. This concern remains unaddressed. In August of 2025, several affordable homeowners, including myself, met with Scott and members of the board at the Restorative Justice to discuss potential paths forward on the market value issue. While the discussion was productive, the original concern regarding market value remains 10 months later. In my view, before considering alternative approaches or new proposals, we should first resolve the underlying question of how market value is being interpreted. As a homeowner, I would like to understand how any proposed changes could affect the resale value of my home. I also have questions about how these changes would be implemented. Can requirements or interpretations that have been in place for more than 2 decades simply be changed to apply retroactively? Finally, I respectfully request that the homeowners be included in the resolution process and be given an opportunity to review, understand, and provide input on any proposed changes before they are finalized. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comments? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, my name is Brenda Lovell, and I live at 867 Crabapple Lane. And I'd like the board to please review the interpretation of the deed prior to considering a deed restriction.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? Before we move ahead here with the agenda, I would like to thank the commissioners for their participation in the study session. I would like to thank Frank Lancaster, our liaison, for his clarification of some of the statutory requirements, limitations for this organization in relationship to the interaction with the town board. And I would particularly like to thank Frank and Pete for their input last night. I think it was a very worthwhile hour and 40-minute meeting that was, I think, informative for the general public and also for the new trustees. Well, with that being said, we have now 3 resignations from this board. Unfortunately, this is Marty's last meeting due to personal and family relationships. And situations. Both Ruth Miller and Julia Daly have resigned due to personal reasons and health reasons. So I had asked Scott to take a look at the makeup of our board. We have about 4 years ago asked the town board to increase the membership to 7. The state statute requires a minimum of 5 and up to a total of 9. I was going to ask this board to say whether they wanted to bring that number back down from 7 to 5. And Scott informs me that the agreement with the town of Estes Park is that they would appoint 7 members. So we will be approaching the town. We will have 2 replacements, actually 3 replacements for continuing terms. Julia Daly was to serve until May of 2027. Ruth Miller was to serve until May of 2028, so I believe. And Marty was to serve until May of 2029. So we will be looking for replacements for those three positions through the town board. And it is my understanding that there will be applications and administration procedures through the town clerk's office and also interviews with the town board. Marty, I'd like to thank you personally for your service to this group. And I wish you well with your family in the future.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay. That being said, cancellation action items of the July meeting. Action item 1, cancellation July 23rd, 6th. Board meeting.
Do we have to do minute approval for last meeting?
Oh, yeah, thank you very much. Are there any corrections?
Yes.
Yeah, there are a couple of corrections. There's typos.
Non-substantive, I submitted to Wendy and
Yeah.
she said she's included, so, okay, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to get that representation.
Are there any additions? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes. I'll make that motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, cancellation of the July 2020 meeting. Scott?
I would like the board to consider canceling July's meeting, as we've talked about, from the beginning of the year. We have a lot of training upcoming, system testing in preparation for go-live date in October, for our Yardi conversion. And the July meeting conflicts with a lot of, substantive training and user acceptance, training. And it would make it very difficult on staff as we train 2 new people now, to try to pull off the July board meeting with a lot of restaurants. So, and I don't believe we have any substantive action items that need to be handled in July. So my recommendation is that we cancel July's board meeting and meet again in August.
Question, board comments.
And under our organizational and governing structure, are we able to take by written consent action outside of a meeting? Meaning if there is something substantive.
I don't believe so. I think it would require a special meeting.
Okay. And I guess further to that point, I'll be out of state the 15th to the basically the end of July, available by video. We do have to have an emergency video or something, but we'll be physically present here for a couple weeks then.
And that's July, correct?
Correct.
Have an issue. We have already postponed the August meeting, I believe.
They've been moved to back a week.
Moved it back a week. That would mean we would be approximately 75 days without any interaction. It seems to me that that is an excessive period of time, particularly with action items that we have. I'm wondering if there could be a meeting third week, fourth week of July. How does that fit with the schedule? You understand my concern?
Yes.
I believe the third week of July, so that would put it on July 22nd.
Board comments?
Is that what you say?
That is still Wednesday, yeah, we stay true to that.
Comments?
Good question. The resignations, what is our quorum? We need four.
Four. We have to
So if
have,
I know I have a tea time morning of July 22nd at a very prominent golf course in Wisconsin, I need to change that.
Assuming we have action. Again, I don't
I'm
anticipate
happy to, but
requiring
we
any
just
action.
we need to have all four. Yeah, got it. Thank you.
unless we can get, another member appointed prior to that.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
One magic wand?
Jim, you had an individual that was interested in serving on the housing authority board. I believe he interviewed for Marty's position a year ago.
Yeah, I had a couple actually, but they now sit on the planning commission with the board of adjustment, so it's up to them as to whether they want to step down and, but I think
Because the
their
reason-
confidence.
The reason that we, back to the election, the reason that we asked to have an increase to 7 members is to try to diversify the age group and the background of those individuals serving on the housing. And since that time, we've managed to do that, and it hasn't worked. People that we have appointed either had conflicts or were unable to spend up their schedule, or they had relationships with staff that were unacceptable. And I think it's we're going to have, I think, a little bit of difficulty coming up with 3 members here fairly quickly. So we'll put this in Frank's work.
Yeah, I think, I'm trying to think back, I think sometimes if we have interviews really close, but we didn't have that many applicants the last time.
Yep.
It was just a few months, we could pick somebody else if we just interviewed for, but that's not the case here. So the the town clerk is gonna have to advertise, get things out there, then we'll have to schedule an interview. And That's usually done with at least two trustees and the chair or someone sitting in on the thing. I think it'd be tough to get that together and have somebody on board by
July.
July.
Yeah.
And to give it the due diligence that it really needs. I would rather take the time to do it right than speed up just so we have somebody for July.
I'm just reluctant to look at 75 or the 75 days. Because I think even if there are no action items, it's happening. It's in the organization.
Is it beyond like reasonable for us to just have like a special kind of session meeting? It's not public.
I think we can make the third week work. There's nothing on our, I'll acknowledge that there's nothing in our Google calendar that relates to already that week. So I think we're in the good, although I'm not looking at the actual source, project calendar. We can make a July meeting happen, that's fine. But I also, separate from this conversation, July's meeting, I want this board to understand that staff is going to be we're going to be spread very thin the remainder of the year, as we already have been, as we focus on our go live, hiring, will ultimately do it by the end of July before new employees at the same time, and coordinating an office moves. I understand the importance of the board meeting in July. We can certainly hold it, but I want you all to understand that we're stretched pretty thin for the remainder of the year, and we're all feeling it as well.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to amend cancellation policy with a change in date for the on July the 22nd.
Okay.
Motion. You have a second. Second. The motion and a second discussion.
That's the fourth Wednesday.
22nd. 22nd. Yeah.
Is the fourth Wednesday. Because the first is on a Wednesday.
So there's 5 Wednesdays.
Yes, that's a 5 Wednesday month.
How often is that?
No discussion, any discussion from the public, any public comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Scott. Be flexible and us on the agenda. Vista Ridge deed restriction, item number 2. You have all received a copy of the full deed restriction. Ask Scott to send those out to you, so that you know the full agenda or what the full deed restriction. And when you get into it, it's not just the SR house that is responsible. It's other government entities. EPHA, it's other entities that are involved.
Can I make a few there?
Sure.
So throughout this process, and as we've been discussing this, I do think we've had some relatively circular conversations. And the focus has been on the resale calculation formula, which is 50% of appreciated value plus applicable fees. And that isn't the real governor on the sales price of deed restricted, income restricted property. The real governor is the 80% qualification threshold. That, with that qualification in mind, and that the household looking to buy a deed restricted home, they cannot make more than that threshold. That is the real governor on the sales price of these homes. The formula certainly plays a role, but again, the real governor is that appreciators, not the formula is deed restriction and the income restriction tied to that. Important to note that here today was never a proposal to change the deed restriction. We've already acknowledged and discussed ad nauseum that we can't do that without a very formalized process that would also require each current owner, reported owner of a deed restricted unit to essentially approve it. There is history here, not with Vista Ridge, but with the neighborhood. When we changed that AMI level, that required every current owner at the time to sign off on that revision. And in that case, it was an upward revision of the AMI. Slight, I think it was only 5%. What is in front of you today, what was provided last month in the packet, was really there's technically three options. We believe the current deed restriction has performed and done a good enough job of threading the needle between what will always be competing goals. The goal of the deed restriction is to maintain affordability for as long as possible, while also realizing the benefits of homeownership. Our professional's opinion of Vista Ridge, looking at the last 20 plus years of sales data, tells me the deed restriction has performed largely very well and has met those goals. What really is up for discussion is the change or the delta between how the deed restriction currently has performed over the last 22 or so years against what it could have if it was restructured that may or may not come a little bit closer to threading that needle in a little bit more positive way in favor of homeowners. And I think that is best evaluated by looking at what the average annual compounded appreciation has been, looking at sales data, and that's 1.55%. I'm scouring all of this. Somehow it didn't make it in here, and I can't find it either. But I believe, if my memory serves me right, going back during looking from 2010, that was as far back as the data went, to a smaller geographical area. Sorry, I missed them. 2010 was it. Looking at sales prices on average from the time these started selling to now, I think the average appreciation has been 3.5%. The deed restriction has performed at 1.55. So the question is that 1.55 reasonable or not? Keeping in mind that the real governor is the income restriction, not the calculation. Meaning that a qualified buyer must be able to qualify for the sales price of their home and actually close on a loan. That delta is probably only between 10 and maybe at the max in very specific familiar household circumstances, maybe as much as $30,000. Right now, the current max purchase price that a household of 3, 80% AMI could reasonably afford with the parameters and some assumptions is probably somewhere around $325,000. 320, depending on the lending environment and low household circumstances. There is a restricted unit on the market now that is listed at 309. So right now that gap is roughly, in a perfect world scenario, about $11,000. So it isn't huge. Again, I'm not discounting the fact that $11,000 to a household can be very meaningful. But we're trying to blend a lot of factors in a very complicated real estate environment. And we will never, I believe you will never find the perfect solution when home ownership with deed restriction and maintaining affordability are inherently at odds, and that friction will always exist. So in front of you, and then I'll open up the floor, is really, we have three paths. Leave it as is. We can make some adjustments short term that really are just aimed at clarifying and providing some additional documentation to both current homeowners and any future buyer that help the transparency piece of this and what has happened, how this deed restriction has performed, and then what reasonable expectations could be going forward. And then the third option, which is where I landed, is that if we look to revise it, there is no administrative way. We don't apply interpretations to it. We use the deed restriction to guide us, and then we use the professional appraisal to guide the max sales price, is to completely revise the deed restriction, which is going to be a fairly large undertaking, which would also require approval of all current homeowners and legal counsel. So I hope that helps kind of reset the foundation of the conversation.
Question?
Yeah, I have a question. I've been trying to figure out. Is there an example? I was looking for an example. Just to, by my calculation, I was today, and I want to sell it. What? How does all that work? Because I mean, that's all. Bill can't come up with plug in this value, add that. They 50% that. That's
Yeah, so the base process is actually relatively simple in that if an owner looks to sell and they're interested in selling, they're required to obtain an appraisal by a licensed appraiser, who then appraises the property and sets the appraised value of the property. That appraisal comes to us. That is done at the homeowner's house. That appraisal comes to us. We take that appraised value and we apply the max sales price formula, which is 50% of the appreciated value plus closing costs plus an allowance for realtor fees, and that becomes the maximum sales price. So just simple math by way of example, if you purchased it at $200,000, an appraiser comes in and then values it 10 years later at $300,000. The formula is your max sales price is $250,000 plus fees and closing costs, which usually average somewhere between an additional $12,000 and $16,000. So in that instance, your max sales price would be somewhere around $265,000.
Or something. And the potential buyer then looks at income level is generated by the area median income as set by the federal government in the state of Colorado every year. That change that appreciates every year. It goes up every year slightly, as does the cost of or the value. So it's based on family size and sure. Oh yeah. I'm gonna try to get some example.
And during that process, do we always require the appraiser to be off our qualified list of appraisers so that, we could?
We don't maintain a list of qualified appraisers. They have to be a licensed appraiser. And so could require, but then administratively we have to populate a list of qualified appraisers, which I don't know that step would be necessary. I think the appraisers are governed by their own ethical rules and legal parameters that I feel fairly comfortable they follow those parameters. This case was what brought this to the forefront was a little bit different in that the homeowner specifically requested a unrestricted appraisal be completed. That was noted in the appraisal, whereas they are obligated to take all encumbrances when evaluating a property and its associated value. The appraisal in this case did not take the encumbrance into consideration, therefore it really wasn't valid. And so I want to highlight that for a moment in that the ambiguity in the deed restriction, in my opinion, is very simple and straightforward. It is the term market value. And what is the market value? I understand where that can be confusing and why it's gray. But the market value of any deed restricted home, whether that's workforce or income restricted, is a secondary market to the primary unrestricted market. So market value is the market value of that restricted home and who can actually buy that in its restricted state.
To go back and talk a little bit about Jim's comment. I read yesterday there is a requirement for selecting the appraiser that is on the list. And
I've got that section open.
yeah, okay.
So I'll read you 3 sentences. This is from section 6. Reading the second sentence, the next 3. Appreciation and market value shall be determined by a market value appraisal from a qualified appraiser. EPHA shall maintain a list of qualified appraisers. The owner shall be responsible for obtaining said appraisal. So it could be read to mean exactly the way you described it, Eric, but it does say there's going to be a list of qualified appraisers, those appraisers to be compiled by the authority. My hope would be to understand what factors go into a complete
So there's,
appraisal.
there's some administrative things here that have not been fallen through the cracks over the years.
Yeah, I want to be clear, a list of appraisers I don't think has ever been maintained by EPHA, certainly before my time, in between 2006 and 2014, it's possible. But I have not run across any documentation we've ever maintained a list, even though that language is.
One of the things also that this has, that this conversation has brought forward for us is we are looking to do 90 some, 100 and some units at the fish hatchery property. Some of those will be home ownership. Some of those will be deed restricted. I don't think we can go back and logically change deed restriction that we currently have on fisheries. That becomes way too complicated. But I think we need to be looking forward with some of the points that have been brought forward to what can we do to make this a different type of process for those units that will eventually be built. So I think there's an opportunity there, and I think that's why we're taking a look at this, getting feedback, comments from current homeowners at least 3. So that's sort of my view. This is not just about current conditions. This is about so, what do we want to do in relationship to directions? Scott. Take out the policy questions. Do we want to forward some of the kinds of things that Scott just alluded to, which never having had a list of appraisers? Change over time so that we can have an understanding with the local and regional appraisers.
And I draw attention to one point. I appreciate the fact that there is an external factor involved here. And that is that there's an independent appraisal who, being governed by their professional guidelines, completes an appraisal. We have been removed from that process. And all we do is take the appraisal and send the formula to the appraiser. I appreciate the fact that there is not a list maintained. We're not selecting appraisers. There can be no sort of discussion of impropriety or working with appraisers behind the scenes that says, hey, set the value here. I appreciate that independent aspect to how this has largely carried out over the last 20 plus years. So I don't know why that language is in the deed restriction when it was originally drafted, but I do appreciate the independent nature of the current process.
Any additional comments? We've been asked to take action in terms of deed restrictions. I think it's we're looking at Scott's request to look at items 1, 2, and 3 and the material provided to the board that talks about this particular situation. But presenting to us the last. What's the feeling of the board? If you're looking at option 2, what we're saying is we're not changing it. We're just simplifying and clarifying all of this work. Off based on Scott.
No, that would be my interpretation of what I put down here. It's really not changing anything at all. It's just trying to add some clarity to the process and a little bit of additional principles that may not be there. So substantively, we could then expect the deed restriction to largely perform the way it has been over the last 20 years. I think, sorry, I won't say it because I don't want to complicate it.
And that would be my recommendation. Knowing that down the road, fish hatchery, we can come up with policy that either incorporates this or changes it whatever way. I'm not ready to say what we do about fish hatchery. I'm looking at our existing deed restriction. This would be terrible. Stacy?
I think, so I also think we need administrative clarification on the policy. There seems to be a disconnect between really understanding the legal values for restricted units. And so I feel like we should maybe look to helping the community understand that we're trying to maximize the benefit by this clarification, but I'm not sure that it's going to resolve the current disconnect or the current obviously unhappiness with the deed restriction as well. So, I mean, for what I'm hearing from the community, is they want something to change. Or what they want is not, can't do it within this interest. So, I mean, I agree, clarification, maybe some, like setting maximum sale price per unit, I think is part of that. Like really having a list with AMI.
Yeah, that would be part of the clarification. It's just trying to add transparency.
So that they would understand what would qualify for a sales price. But I'm still like, from what I'm hearing, I don't think that this is going to resolve our issue. It's our precedent.
Did it?
Well, I was hoping that there'd be some flexibility. If the result is the same either way, it's kind of an exercise of futility and a waste of staff resources. I am not so sure that there can be a practical financial impact that results from an administrative review and change. There, from the very first sentence of section 14, there's discretion that's vested in this organization, through the board decision process. I'm fully supportive of going ahead with the recommendation on option 2. I think it's imperative. I'm not going to give legal counsel, but we need legal counsel. I understood that the homeowner had involved legal counsel way back when, and I don't accept the proposition that it's been unaddressed since last July. It's been addressed and will continue to be addressed. It's not a simple solution, but I think I'm not willing to say that there's not going to be any practical effect if we go through the administrative process, because I think there is a process that could get us there. Again, council's going to have to weigh in on that. And it's not like we have a clean whiteboard to just go ahead and make up whatever we want to. But I think there is some discretion that's vested in the board to make this work. As to some retrospective application, that's another issue. If there's another way to, speed up the process or put down a marker somewhere in the process, I'd be in favor of that. I don't want this to go on another year. But I'm not willing to just say we're not going to make any changes that are going to end up resulting in a practical financial impact on the owner, because I think I read things in the document to give us some flexibility, I believe. So I want the administrative review to go forward. I think council needs to be involved, and first year law school contracts, you learn that and any ambiguity in a document is drafted against is to be interpreted against the drafter. So if there's ambiguity here and or we haven't followed the language, then it's on us. And I think we do our very best to resolve this in a way that's fair, most fair for everybody involved as expeditiously as we can. But again, it is not an easy fix. But I'm in support of the recommended immediate path option 2. And then 3 is the fallback, being cognizant of fish hatchery coming down the road.
Marty?
I agree with that.
Joint motion. Discussion. Okay.
I think I'd like a motion, and what I heard in the conversation was a applicable motion would probably be something to the effect of, in the short term, see if we can add some clarification, so something you get to item number 2, but begin work on option 3, focused on what a revision could look like to the full restriction. Trying to get a better balance between maintaining affordability, long-term appreciation for homeowners. That's right.
And also the area median income component is important because that varies based on family size. And the time of the year.
And can I just make one sure? I've got it in front of me. People are wondering what the hell I'm talking about. The first sentence of section 14 says, the grantee and each owner, quote, grants and assigns the Estes Park Housing Authority the right to review and enforce compliance with this agreement. And I think that opens the door to some discretion. So that's my point.
All right, I would entertain a motion to, move ahead with administrative clarification option number presented, by the, director of the housing authority.
May I suggest an amendment to that motion, then also ask that we approve the recommended long-term path of option 3. Should we not be able to get to the desired result on option 2? Did I just confuse that too much?
Not for me.
And it's laid out as 2 here and then long-term is 3. So I think we can go ahead and do it now.
And I have a motion to move ahead with administrative clarification, item number 2, and before we work through template number 3, should that be necessary? Motion.
So moved.
Second.
You got it.
Any further discussion from the board? Any public comments? Yes, Mary.
Yes, this motion include identifying the textual basis for not for rejecting the homeowner submitted interpretation for the petition in July 2025.
That goes back to my earlier comments that under the existing deed restriction and under the guidelines that govern appraisals and appraisers of said property, a market value that does not take into consideration all encumbrances on a property is not valid under this deed restriction.
I don't understand where that's in the text of the deed. It defines, the deed doesn't define market value. And so it's, what is the type, what's the valuation problem that the appraiser is being assigned to solve? We're not disputing that an appraiser needs to acknowledge the deed restriction in the appraisal. I think that's perfectly accepted, but I think the dispute is about what the valuation problem the appraiser is solving as well.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. I go back to Scott's previous comments that the maximum value on a property is based on the 80% area median income of the buyer. And so we have to take a look at the area median income as provided by the Housing and Urban Development of the state of Colorado. That's the determining factor of the ultimate value. We cannot sell property at that value or that value or below or negotiate. Then we lose the affordability of the property. And also the public also needs to be aware that the Housing Authority has provided $50,000 non-serviceable second in order to help the buyer qualify for a mortgage through a private loan. So, any further discussion? Any other public comments? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All those, any opposed? Thank you for your input. The development proposed rewrite.
I'll just provide a brief introduction. I hope you all had an opportunity to read both the attached letter and the attached memo, which has been provided in extract form to the town Estes Park community development staff for their review. I will acknowledge that they were surprised that it was shared at a board level. And that was communicated to me, but I felt I wanted this board to have the opportunity to review what was in 30%, and to have a level of input to what staff's recommendations were based on our review through our housing amendments. So that is why it was put in front of you. I communicated the intent to send the staff, why it was communicated with you all, and the intent was simply to involve this board from a policy perspective on what we are recommending as a body should be included or considered as part of the development that we read. You may notice in some of my most recent language, I've also revised how I'm describing the development code rewrite. I'm describing it more as a revision to current development code, because one of the things that struck me in my review of these is that it's not really a development code rewrite. It seems more like a revision than a rewrite, but that's semantics, I guess. And then I wanted this board to have an opportunity to review our recommendations and then sign off on them so we can issue sort of a final set of recommendations to the town for their consideration and their consultants' consideration.
And going through the development code, right, and the comments that have been made by Pete, got the current writing of the development code basically eliminates the ability of the housing authority to do much of anything other than low income housing. They capped the income of any of the occupants of the purchase units at 80%. That will eliminate workforce, the majority of the workforce. It will eliminate the ability for us to deal with anything other than 80% or below area median income. And then density is an issue. There are some significant problems in relationship to the housing authority and the draft rewrite that we are seeing from it. Historically, same thing happened in 1999, where development code was rewritten to reduce the potential population size of town district. The code that was in place before 1999 and the comprehensive plan that was done at that particular time. Had the ability of Estes Park to expand to somewhere in the neighborhood of not Estes Park, but the Estes Valley, someplace in the neighborhood of 22 to 23,000 people. Rewrite of that development code diminished that by density and units down to, I believe it was about 18,000. This rewrite further reduces the ability of the town of Estes Park to meet the needs of people who need to work here, be here to make this a viable community without commuting in from Loveland or Longwood. It's I appreciate the work that people have done with this, and I think it's very important to raise these issues now before it goes before the town board for approval. And the development code continues to be rewritten to reduce population.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Scott, I would encourage you with every rewrite or revision, whatever the term might be appropriate, that you would people, not how you put the whole work in it, but go through what you've done to see they taken this seriously and made the appropriate changes. Because we don't want them to get so far down the road.
That's exactly right.
That it's a done deal.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
I guess that they're surprised that we responded. We have
One organization said the building, the town, something like that. Technical administrative question. Can we get a copy of that letter with revised signature blocks? Before it leaves here today, so that Marty has an opportunity to sign that, as well as remove Julia and Root. If we could do that, appreciate it. That way we could get it to get it board. Get it to clerk for inclusion.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be excellent. Yeah. Any other comments on? Oh, great.
Right. I just had a comment from the, first of all, the board has not, the town board has not looked at this and done anything. Keep in mind, this is a 30% draft. This is really, really early in the process. So nothing here is set in stone. There are things in here that the town board would not agree to either. But a lot of this stuff, frankly, from a consultant is boilerplate. They put out there as a straw man to start working on. So before anybody gets really uptight about this, understand you are being involved very early in the process. They're looking for input. This isn't something, there are things in here that did not come from the direction, I can tell you, from either the planning commission or the town board. And a lot of it is just a straw man to start the process. 30% is really early. So this is the time to get it in. I think a lot of these things can be changed and addressed. And it shouldn't be the kind of friction that it's starting to come up with. It really is still a partnership. And I think that's what staff is looking.
Yeah, I've been through this before with development agreements. And oftentimes it's the professional planners and developers that get their way because they believe in this is the standard of our industry. I think it's important for us to, as an entity that not only develops housing, but also rents housing, supports our community, to make sure that our voice is heard early on in the process, so that we can continue on our.
I would even say this is the opinion at this point of staff at the town either. This is something that the consultants wrote to start with, and now it's a place to start nipping away the corners and changing it. So it's,
and that's the reason that I think that this particular EPHA recommendation is being submitted.
Yep, and it's great.
Particular time.
I'm really glad you're doing that. It needs to be done. And
Because if the consultants continue on down this path, they'll do what they want to do. And they need to make sure that our voices is heard.
yeah, if nobody redirects them, why would they change? Including staff or the town board.
Some staff have been directed to work alongside the housing authority to present at a study session on July 28th. That's really diving into the majority of the things that have been brought up in this letter, as far as housing definitions, workforce housing definitions, incentives for workforce housing, and all of that. So, and that came to the direction of staff from the town board. So we have a memo, and we've been working on presentation to address some of the questions that they had. So again, I think if anything, this will support that conversation that has already been started.
Yeah, I think those are really important points that you just made. I appreciate that because we are involved at the right timing
Yes.
as well. And I think the more parties that are involved in the process, the better end result we'll get for the community. And I think we're on a stable and good platform for that.
That's the risk, and this happens all the time with development. If you want to bring people in early, but when you bring some people in early and make a question, it's mushy. Yeah, and there's a lot of change in that, and then people get kind of sometimes bent out of shape. But the alternative is you should wait till things are more set in stone and then bring people in, and then you have what we talked about before is, well, you bring in instead of the last minute, it's a done deal. So damned if you do, damned if you don't. I think just understanding this is the mushy stage. This is what's coming from the consultants. Nothing's set in stone. Appreciate the comments. There's gonna be a lot of changes. And I don't see that there's a conflict there. I think we're all on the same goals. I can tell you from at least the town board standpoint, there has been no discussion at all or any discussion about limiting growth in town or stopping people from developing or cutting back on the number of people. What they're responding to is the quality of development, the quality of life, and how development fits with that, which we are hearing from constituents that they don't want to see. And we hear this all the time. We don't want to be a Breckenridge. We don't want to be a Vale. We don't want to have 6-story apartment buildings. There is a part of the character, and that's always been a balance.
I like your term, this is the mushy stage. I'm gonna use that. I like
Yeah. It's a technical term.
It is. I like it.
It's
Very
similar
complex.
to housing development too. You do outreach too early and you have preliminary plans and, there's a whole process.
Yeah, I'm sure you've been on the other side of that. Yep. Even when all the details, when you first have a public meeting and you don't have them, and then so they say you're not prepared, you don't know what you're doing, and,
I'm gonna start saying we're in the mushy stage.
yeah.
I just say from, the fear of being a Telluride or a Breckenridge or Vale, I feel like with the maximum 8 units of density, that's just impossible. It would really be more like a Telluride or a Yellowstone Club in terms of exclusivity, because with the current density, there's no way we can get to a scale anywhere near what a Breckenridge or Vale would be.
But that's the fear of the public.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, and you say 8 units per density. I was called the 7-Eleven test. You talk to the second, we don't have a 7-Eleven anymore. It's been a long time. But if you went to talk to this third person in line at 7-Eleven and said, well, what type of, do you think 8 units per acre or 15 units per acre is the proper density for you? What you is like, look at it. Those are kind of terms of art that the majority of people have no clue what 8 units per acre looks like or what 150 units per acre. It's as planners and developers, you say that on a second-hand basis, and you just know it all the time. It's just second nature. But the public doesn't. So you got to keep that in mind. Is what does that mean to the quality of the life? And even there's 8 units per acre, and there's 8 units per acre. It's how it's developed. It's how well it's planned. How well it's built. Density is the issue. It's the impact on the environment and impact on the community. That's the kind of thing to consider. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
The letter has been revised to reflect the current date and proper signature lines, so we can print that out at the end of this meeting and sign it before you all leave.
An interesting figure in terms of 8 units per acre. As an example, the complex that I live in, Ridge Meadow, has 156 units. It's on 30 acres. It's 5.2 units per acre. So that gives you some sort of perspective as to what the density looks like in terms of units per acre. Okay, anything else on the development?
Yeah.
Do we need a motion to submit that? You've already
You could
submitted
do a motion, but I've submitted in draft form. I'll strip the draft off, have you sign, that'll be the action for your signatures.
I think
That works for
we're
you.
all agreeing with that.
Agreed.
We're going to go into executive session, at the end of this meeting. There may be potential action. After that, we won't know that until after the executive session. But it's possible, so I just want to make that public announcement.
Item number 5, financial review, Scott.
Not much to speak on today. The cash flow that's in front of you is the same that was presented last month. As I haven't reconciled, May. Yet, and we didn't have lodging tax, sales tax collection numbers until just yesterday, the day before, and they are up. Oh goodness, it was 12.9%, I think.
Or four.
I think that's for the year, or for the period. Now I know.
Thanks for the.
They're up over last year. Take that with a grain of salt. We are still very early. That's only April collections. So the impactful months are still a few months away from us. Really, that's June, July, August, and September. So it's trending well, but it's still early season. That's really all I have. I think the only other thing of note, which would come in the programming update, which is we have completed a marketing push, so to speak, for workforce rental assistance. And that has resulted in a pretty significant uptick in residents of our community who are able to take advantage of that. It's roughly a 60-40 split, maybe 65-35, that in the private market who are taking advantage of workforce rental assistance, and then those that live in our properties. And our significant push was to try to capture the private market more, to make sure that there is an awareness. I know Wendy's played a role in that, trying to make sure that's communicated to folks so that people know it's out there. You may see a more sorts as well, just to make sure that folks know it's available and out there as a resource, with the intent being, of course, to drive affordability, where we can't drive affordability at a project level basis. So I'm happy to see it's been utilized, and the programming budget and fund allocations are more than sufficient based on demand and anticipated demands.
Did you want to speak about upcoming loans planned action in September,
Yes.
August or September?
Yes, I will. So this is really a heads up that we have a number of notes coming due. Most of our notes are on a 30-year, 40-year amortization, but they have balloon provisions, most typically 10, one or two might be at a 15-year mark. So we have a number of loans that are hitting that balloon mark that are upcoming. So this board will be presenting some points of decision with those loans, how to extend, how to go about them. I think part of my proposal in September will be moving some funds around in the hopes to pay off the note on the Pines, which is not due for a while, but I just wanted to give you all a heads up that I will be making some proposals most likely in September about how to handle those upcoming notes. In the short term, we do have a note that balloons off Riverside in July that we are simply extending under the current terms to give us an opportunity to evaluate all of them in September. So just anticipate that discussion.
Good. Just as a point of information, we use the equity and the value of Pines to help finance EPHA. That's why we have debt on the Pines, which was free and clear at the point of big was finance. So that's why there's a. Okay, anything else? No. Speak.
Thanks, again, thank you for your input last night.
Yeah.
Thank you and everybody for attending. So my first note here that we're scheduled for town board study session on June 9th and the town board project review on July 28th. Given that pretty much everybody in the room was there for the study session last night, I'm not going to comment further on that. We are right now in the process of coordinating the best strategy to implement the additional fire suppression that's required in the attic due to subdividing the property. It's tricky to access because the access point to the attic is small, and then there's an even smaller access point up in the attic that you would have to crawl through. So I had a call last week with the architect of the building, drywall contractor, and grouper to try to determine the most cost-effective way to address this item, and I expect to have a proposal later this week.
So I have any small, very small people, pretty loose.
It's
Can we use 10-year-olds?
let's do 10-year-olds that have like very small boards that they have. On fish hatchery. So the development team held recent meetings with community development, public works, the town manager's office, and we were looking to schedule another meeting with the water department. That meeting happened on Monday. That was our third all hands meeting with the water departments. Previous ones also included the fire department, as well as our third party water consultant, our civil engineer, the town's third party water consultant. So really trying to figure out the best path forward. And in this meeting, this was the first one that the town administrator was a part of as well. Unfortunately, we didn't come to a great resolution. We thought we had a pretty clear direction and plan kind of in October, November that we had been working on throughout the last 6 months or so. And then the end of April, early May, the direction from the water department changed. And so we are working to react to that change of direction in order to come up with a solution that is economically responsible and viable for this project. Part of which, after this meeting, I will be going up to Bellaterra and trying to see if they're interested in sharing a water tank cost. Because we're evaluating different options for water pressure. So right now, that's really the main item. We have a call later today. Our internal team will talk a little bit more about the water item. We had a meeting last week as well with Public Works that talked about the realignment that's necessary for the fish hatchery and Fall River intersection to we had put that we need a follow-up conversation because it also impacts the design of the extension of the Fall River mixed-use trail that the town has. So there needs to be additional coordination on design and construction with that. But we wanted to make sure that we had the water item sorted out before we started to spend additional time and resources looking at the offsite intersection improvements. Any questions on fish hatchery at the moment?
Can I say just a couple words?
Sure.
I wanted to highlight Pete's comments that the goalposts were moved on the water conversation, which we've had good substantive conversations with all the parties that needed to at the town. I think we're on a better path. It doesn't change the fact that we did go down a path in what we felt was lockstep with the water division, that now we're having to change direction. So we're going to complete an analysis of what we all believed in the room were really the three technically viable options. And we're going to vet them a little bit more than we might otherwise, so that we all can collectively come to what is the best decision, not only for the utility itself, but for the project, and try to find a balance there that works to deliver all the water volume and pressure, and all of that to the development where it needs to be. So,
and none of the three solutions are the one that we were previously pursuing. So it's all new.
yeah, that's correct. So now what changed was we were sent down a path to do a pressurized system via a pump station. So we spent significant time and energy and investment in exploring that solution, and that solution was ultimately taken off the table. So we have lost about 6 months of time, which is unfortunate and has real cost. But hopefully we can expedite the analysis going a different direction and find a viable solution for the direction.
And this is not the first time that the rules have been changed. All the windows and issues.
The town is-
Yeah, tell us point. cost us about $140,000. It's significant. So that was after the building permit had already been issued. All right, moving on.
So for Tiny Town, or 830 Marine, our application for the Prop 123 land banking funds were submitted a couple weeks ago on May 26th. As I noted in our last meeting, it's extremely important as a large portion of the funds for the program are being cut for the foreseeable future due to 1.5 million budget deficit at the state. Since then, they've spread out the $150 million cut to this program over a span of 3 years. So it changed from having very, very little money to next year to longer term reduced funding compared to what we had the past couple of years. So they chose which sword to die on, either spread out the funding gap or take it all at once. And they felt that spreading out the funding gap was going to be more prudent. But we will also see if there's future budget deficits at the state level. And unfortunately, the Prop 123 language, when that was formally passed, has language in there that essentially allows the state to claw back money from that program if there is a state deficit. So we were in a good place a couple years ago, or past couple years, with funding from the state. But it feels like for the next few years forward, that's going to reduce a little bit. Probably the same on the federal level too with the current administration. So information that we provided with that application included the general land planning information, including a tentative unit count, a high level pro forma that included capital stack and renting assumptions. We had 3 letters of support that we provided. We had a land appraisal, a phase 1 environmental report, and a geotechnical report as well. So CHAFA, that's the Colorado Housing Finance Authority, were reviewing the applications. They communicated that they expect to have the awardees selected in July, and roughly 50% or so of the applicants will be awarded. I think we really have a great site in this one because it's flat and it has existing infrastructure serving it that will keep overall development costs in check. I think the town had recently improved off to the east there, Marine Ave, as you get into the roundabout, and off to the west as well. There's already a signalized intersection with turn lanes. So hopefully that would reduce the off-site infrastructure costs and burden that are put on a project like this. And as you can tell, that's obviously a challenge that we're facing with fish hatchery right now as we try to get that parcel to have better infrastructure to be able to develop housing on it. So the biggest hurdle that we have, I feel like, is that the priority for the state, just from politics, is to get everything constructed ASAP. I think it's a terrible name, land banking program, when they want to get construction done immediately because they are counter philosophies of one another. But politics is reigning supreme in terms of the timing. So the timing of construction is really directly related to fish hatchery for a variety of reasons, including, but not limited to, that there's just not enough funds available to do both at the same time. So as we continue down the path of exploring fish hatchery and seeing if we are awarded funds here for Prop 123, we'll continue to evaluate what is the best use of 6E funds and timing for these projects. There's a miscellaneous section here. I thought it was interesting to note over the last 2 years, construction costs relatively have been flat, particularly compared to 2020 to 2023, where they went up an obscenely amount. But that being said, the first 4 months of construction costs in 2026 have gone up more than the prior 3 years combined. In a couple of areas, copper, aluminum, lumber, and obviously gas, which impacts a lot of different areas. So construction costs, while they have been a bit stable, they're going up right now. See where they end up.
I believe I heard a report on this morning that April's cost of living is up 4.2% over last year.
So no interest rate cuts anytime soon, and that's going to hurt the affordable home ownership program as well, because that really impacts their purchase power.
Much what happens there.
And then my last comment here, as I mentioned last meeting, I started to reach out to various jurisdictions around the area, mountain communities that don't have ski resorts, to compare our maximum density, not just the maximum density, that's where it started with, but also trying to understand what their incentives are for affordable workforce employee housing. In my email, I actually used all three because, as we touched on a little bit last night, the definitions of those are completely different depending upon what jurisdiction and what municipality you're in. Estes Park, we say workforce housing, that's really geographically constrained. You talk to people in Denver, what workforce housing is, that's essentially attainable housing. It's AMI restricted. It has nothing to do with geography. So that's another thing that complicates when we talk about terminology. It is very geographic dependent to where you are and what those terms mean. So I've looked through all of the different zoning codes for these different municipalities here. And I've reached out to each of them as well to try to get additional information, because the maximum density is pretty easy to find. The areas that they're trying to incentivize for workforce affordable employee housing are convoluted into a bunch of different sections, but the majority includes a fair number of inclusionary housing provisions, fee in lieu, and land or unit dedication or deed restriction for private developers when they're developing their market rate. They typically need to provide X percent of units at an affordable level. And I think that's going to be difficult for us to do in Estes with that 8 units an acre maximum density, just because you have inclusionary zoning, you have to be able to spread out that cost over higher value market rates. And so if we're down to 8 units an acre, where the majority of the comps here are 20 to 25 units an acre for a max density, an inclusionary zoning policy would be difficult to really execute on properly from private development, and could have a unintended consequence of really stymie the forward market development or the market rate development, which would also have an impact on the affordable housing stock as well. So hopefully I hear back from a couple other of those jurisdictions. So far, it's just been Salina and Vista.
Questions for Peter?
I have one, sorry. Sorry.
Wait, please.
Yeah, I'm not gonna talk about Clear Street yet. I wanted to acknowledge Pete in his very baking application. He put a significant amount of effort in that application to try to make it absolutely as strong as possible. We sent a couple letters of recommendation. I don't know if we ended up getting one from the National Park.
Yes,
we did. So National Park School District, the mayor as well. I think those are the 3 that they're able to secure.
guarantee you nobody else has a letter from the national park. So
So I wanted to acknowledge Pete for his effort on that application. He recognizes the importance of that potential funding. We're cautiously optimistic. We're not in the best position. The site is really well positioned, but the fact that we received $7 million for Fall River Village sort of level sets the expectations a little bit. We are certainly very hopeful, but I want to acknowledge Pete's effort on that application. And he was very extraordinary. He did a great job. So that's
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
Blue Street?
Clean Street Whimsidoodle is beginning some public outreach meetings, and I think I haven't spoken with them about them. In coordination with us in the town to really, I think the focus will be to gather thoughts and opinions, involve the community on what Clean Street and a redivision of the potential redivision of those 3 parcels, Whimsidoodle's parcel ours at 157 Cleve and the parking lot could look like, and how it could impact the community, hopefully in a positive way. So I believe those outreach meetings start in
This month.
late June.
I'd like to know when that is. Because I think that we need to avail ourselves of that. Participate in that meeting, not necessarily as a formal board meeting, but as participants and observers, and pay attention to that, because it's my understanding that Whimsdoodle and the other folks on Place Street very much like to take over our Cleave Street 10 units and scrape it. Build. This building is free and clear. It's got 10 individuals and more families in there, and we figure out what they want to do with their building, where they want those people to relocate, and how that's going to be. So we need to pay attention. We need to listen to what plans officers would like to know what that meeting is. I think it's what I thought of this what the plan is.
That sounds like roughly correct. We've posted notices to our residents, and we'll send out additional communication acknowledging those dates. Pete will be there in attendance representing the EPHA in my absence, and I will be a meeting member soon. I think it's just after I get back. I think it's important to acknowledge, Eric, I appreciate that. I think we should be involved. We are involved. I appreciate the board's involvement and believe they should be involved. But this would be a joint effort between the three landowners. This is not someone imposing their will on these parties, but I think all three parties agree that it presents a unique opportunity for a redevelopment that maybe couldn't otherwise happen. That something will happen on the two parcels, most likely that flank our building, which would have not only significant impacts on our building and our residents. We have to acknowledge the asset for what it is, which is a nearly 100-year-old building that is approaching its useful end. So there's a lot of items wrapped up.
Just as an editorial comment to that, this building had reached the end of its useful life when we purchased it. We have to invest a whole $1 into it to bring it up to livable standards. Yes, it's a 100-year-old building, but it still houses people who live and work. And it's free and clear. So, okay, thank you. Program updates.
You're stuck with me.
Again,
Yep.
or still?
Still, I think would be the proper description. This is Jessica's out on vacation and getting much time off, and Jen, excuse me, is down the hill with other members of the team in ERD training, as Wendy was down there yesterday. So that's why you were stuck with me. I think the only substantive updates from a programming standpoint, one I already mentioned, is the uptick in workforce rental assistance, which really coming after a sort of marketing push for both Crossroads and us. We want to make sure that the community knows that resource is available. And part of that push, which I didn't mention earlier, came from when, if you recall, we did a pilot phase for workforce rental assistance. We had some learnings. We tweaked the program a little bit in coordination with Manager Speedling as well, where we discussed what we learned. Did we learn anything? Do we need to tighten it up? And we made some small tweaks to the program before we went live. And I learned at some point a few months after that conversion from pilot to sort of a permanent program, that somehow along the way, the very short period where we quote unquote stopped funding was simply to evaluate how the pilot period performed, make those program changes and sort of re-go live. But that translated to there was no more money available for workforce rental assistance, which is not true. My overarching theme to this is when it comes to workforce rental assistance, we can allocate funds based on need and demand. There has been more than enough set aside for programming total to allow us to do that. That if demand were 300,000 in a calendar year, we can fund that without issue. So we really push that back out through Crossroads and other channels, EVIX, to make sure that it is properly communicated that funding is available, and we want those funds to be used if they're necessary. Jeff is also working through some non-compliance issues with various deed restrictions on the workforce side, and a couple of them may be reaching the point of enforcement, which the town is responsible, on their, on non-EPHA properties. The town handles enforcement, because technically the deed restrictions are their agreement with the developer at the time. So Jeff was working through the town on a few of those. And I think we're still getting good results, but there are a couple out there that are receiving non-compliance letters. Along that note, I will also note that we became aware of a DPA recipient that is advertising leasing of the home in which that household received DPA assistance that is explicitly forbidden for those funds. So there are two remedies. Remake it your primary residence because there's a primary residence requirement. And you cannot lease it without this board's approval. Or pay off the DPA note that you have. So that non-compliance letter went out yesterday, I believe, for that. So those are the compliance issues. Good. And I think that's it from one more thing. There is a unit on the market. As I mentioned earlier, Vista Ridge, which is deed restricted. This is one of the unique. I think there are 3 of them that have a $56,500 soft second. This is one of those, and the max sales price is set at $309,000.
Anything else?
Not on programming.
Okay. Anything else under item 7?
A quick up, so trailhead down payment, I'm working with, the governor on that has been me, and no one else. So I am, putting final touches with Impact Development Fund, before we, go live with that. But that should be coming in soon, and then there'll be a marketing push with that. From an operating perspective, the property managers and Jessica, and maintenance have been busy. We are down 1 maintenance person at the moment. Those positions should be posted this week to fill the 1 vacant position, and then fill a newly created either part-time year-round or seasonal full-time. Jeff had a conversation, I think, with both maintenance technicians that we believe the best fit would be a part-time with a structure year-round. I believe that's where we landed, right, Joe? Was it the look? Maybe not. Okay. Some of it's
what it turned out to be.
got it. Some of it's going to be dependent on the applicant pool, right? Because some people are full-time seasonal makes a lot of sense and works for their circumstance. But if those folks aren't out there and don't apply, maybe a part-time makes sense for some folks in our community. So we're putting it out with sort of both options, and we'll see where that lands. But all we could financially, operationally absorb was basically after the next, it's structured that way. The big news, which you all heard me communicate last night, the Fall River Village is completely stabilized. We are down to, on units that we aren't holding, we are down to 2 vacancies, as Wendy just confirmed. So that is wonderful news. Marla, I want to acknowledge Marla for the significant effort she put in really the last couple months to get that leased up. She's good at a wide range of things. But one of those is leasing units up. She does an incredible job of getting units leased up, and she is really the responsible party for making Fall River Village cross that road. So kudos to her.
Yes, indeed. I think it's interesting to know how quickly those units actually have to sit EPHA and also maintenance work that had to be done and a little furniture efforts. That's done as quickly.
Because I want to make one more note on Fall River Village, and this is going to be true. I'm going to use Fall River as an example, but this is true of all of our housing. I had a conversation last night with someone after our study session, after my presentation at the town board, actually. Someone called me and we had a relatively lengthy conversation. It was It was someone who lives with us now. Sorry. And it highlighted the impact that we have in this organization has on community. This household had an opportunity to move in, going through rough circumstances and a significant change in their life. We had the availability, we had the opportunity to move them in. The timing worked great. It worked great for this family. And this specific family, I also got the opportunity to see going on a bike ride as I rode through Fall River Village, and I kind of do a little scope out what's going on our property and leave. And it warmed my heart a couple of weeks ago to see this family and how hard the parents of this family work. And I see them in the community working. They actually, I see them working in the community, and seeing them be able to enjoy a comfortable living environment, see their children play in the parking lot, have that available space, see them enjoying the pool after hours, and enjoy that family time together. Really shows how much the housing that we provide positively impacts people's lives and affords them an opportunity to live a well-rounded life, hopefully, and that means a lot. That was reflected in comments spoken to me yesterday after the study session and town board meeting, and I just wanted to relay that message here. The work that we do in this board does to support all of our households. It really does mean a lot. We don't often get to see that, or this board may not see that on a day-to-day basis, but we get to see that, and it's really rewarding to us.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, anything else under item 7?
No.
Old business. Annual report. Postponed to August 2025 annual report. Yep. Yeah, I think we need to be looking at some revision in timing of those kinds of things. Our annual report, operating budget. That's just comment on office move.
Yeah, I want to make a comment and go back. I fully acknowledge that they should be done more timely, but I also want to acknowledge that both the operating report and the planned annual report are new. This organization has not done those reports, but I believe they're important and necessary. Me being the sole author of those at the moment, on my capacity, I just haven't been able to complete them, even though I promised them. So they are new. This board hasn't ever received those in the past, but I believe they are important and should be done. I just have had to recognize my own limitations and ability to deliver around those. But the intent is to deliver that.
Thank you. Office move.
We will now be moving offices. So my intent is before I leave to deliver a roughly 52% deposit to make sure if there's any changes right after I leave, that the furniture can be ordered. We anticipate about an 8-week lead time. Then there's some changes to the building itself, just in terms of carpet replacement. Bar has to be removed, and we have to add 2 junction boxes in existing electrical outlets to allow us to move into the space. So we'll begin that process here before I leave. And I believe in looking at all of our complicated schedules with the RD conversion, I think we are targeting a move hopefully sometime in the month of August.
Thank you. Moving, take note, we moved the August board meeting from the 12th to 19th.
There would be a
I would like to have a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing the purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of any real, personal, or other property interest, except that no executive session shall be held for the purpose of concealing the fact that a member of a local public body has a personal interest in such purchase acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale, Castle Ridge, and then 381 South St. Green. Wildfire.
So moved.
Motion, do I have a second? Second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I would like to offer, Holly Bangs and Frank Lancaster the opportunity to stay and be a part of this discussion, should you choose to do that. Otherwise, everyone else can be excused. And again, we may come back and do additional information.
I'll make one additional note before we enter executive session. Vice Chair Seoli will be excusing herself for one of the discussions in executive session around wildfire, as she is employed by law. Right?
And then I would talk about, have a brief discussion on the Castle Ridge, the 381 South St. Green. And the elimination of consideration. And do you want to bring up your point on wildfire before we go ahead to other?
Yes, it's on what wildfire, there's joined. My major concern in there was, we don't want to spread ourselves. Other they've gotten to the, on their head and work. And, I just think it's true fiscal responsibility of that, not going out and doing it. We have tiny town fish hatchery, that's taking virtually, I don't know, 610. Nothing appropriate.
Yeah, I think the cost of the price that's been offered on the two parcels at Castle Ridge is significantly more than what we can get into at this particular time, given the other requirements that have foreseeable your future. So at least at this point, I think it's something. Castle Ridge, talk about Castle Ridge. That's a potential sale of an asset.
Yeah, so we've owned Castle Ridge since 2019 with the intent, largely the intent was always to build ownership product of some kind on that parcel. It was purchased, as I said earlier, in kind of a different era, pre-COVID, where the world has changed quite a bit. For us locally here, not only impacts the cost of construction, but also available funding and other opportunities that might be a better fit for the mission of this organization. So the organization is positioned to own real property and also to sell real property. So this is an asset that we received construction cost estimates on that kind of exceed, I think, what our mission is. So it's an asset that we can now, in my mind, potentially leverage via sale and use those proceeds and the associated profit to the betterment of housing with another opportunity.
Yeah, and we know that it's free and clear, so they will.
We do.
Kind of just changed that. Or,
I'm not gonna discuss the appraisal in this meeting or the value, until we make a decision. And that we can just, we'll work to what the market price actually is.
could it be useful for us to take the appraisal to read it, real to the market analysis? Probably costs us $500-$700.
Yeah, I think we can, yes, we can get an appraisal. I just want to acknowledge that getting land appraisals and assets can be a little bit of a challenge. I think we know that comparables can be a little bit challenging. But we can certainly do that, if we think it is necessary to get an appraisal prior to going to market.
Thoughts? Your thoughts on that?
Don't necessarily know if that's necessary because in my experience, most of the appraisals are used for the banks. And if we were the ones to secure an appraisal, a bank wouldn't accept that because they need a true third party appraiser.
You're absolutely right. You're right. I think we could get 2 or 3 quotes.
We received 2. Okay, yeah. I think I said 1 earlier, but we did. Sorry.
Would you like a motion?
Yes.
I would entertain a motion to offer the 6.5 acres of Castle Ridge vacant land for sale on the open market. I'll make that motion. Second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. And, well, we'll move ahead with that particular process. And find a broker. Perhaps other brokers that put in large business.
I guess that is another question for this body. Is we can do 1 of 2 things. We can, well, there's a few options. I think we could market the property, would result in not being listed on the MLS, is my understanding. Or we could publish and market the property for sale without use of a broker, but it would not get the MLS, and just coordinate the transaction to our legal counsel. Or I could submit an RFP for broker representation to help us sell the property.
If we're going to do a private sale, I would probably recommend that we don't do that for any longer than about 30 to 45 days. My experience that trying to sell property without widespread advertising, use the systems that are available through our realtor network here in town. Do that for much longer, don't necessarily get business. Yeah, I agree with you. That's been my experience over the years. And I think that the sooner we get it out there, and expose it to the world, I think the quicker we can close the deal. It's free and clear on us. We get those, be able to do a lot of work. Yeah, and I don't see it if we go into real estate market, I don't see what have to be. Because that just delays the process.
You could push back and say, I am uncomfortable selecting a broker to sell a property without a competitive process.
You say it 2 interested parties.
Say 2.
Competition on price.
Correct.
Okay.
so I'm not very familiar with real estate and how those things work with the RFP. What does that mean?
So we would issue a request for proposals to represent EPHA in the disposition of the residential property. So this would be hiring a realtor, and we would submit solicitation basically for offers to represent us. So
that would be the transparent way for us to sell that property to the community. So I'm in favor of us being as transparent and offering it as openly as possible, because I think that is the best way to go with these things. When we're private and like, you know what I mean? It just seems kind of weird to go on like outside of the public review.
Right, and I think we're getting more and more focused. In public.
Yeah, that's a real interesting point. We've talked this morning and in the past about open communications with the general public. And being transparent. in what we do. Trying to do this behind closed doors with our attorney is the opposite. So perhaps what we need to do is go right to an RFP. Get somebody that preferably somebody local.
Yes. I'm adamant about some,
Well, you know, because
for the valley, just,
You know, the local market.
I don't know.
Do you feel comfortable making that selection?
I think what we can do is possibly, I think we can structure an RFP that provides some preference for local brokers. I might have to do a little bit of research on how I can structure that, what that could look like before issuance. I think if we set parameters in the RFP on the basis of our selection, which would really be on just a couple of factors, I think if we make that clear up in the RFP, then be comfortable with that. Could be an item though. Timing is not critical on this, other than we're in the sales season, so that is a piece. But realistically, I leave on Friday. Pete will be acting executive director in my absence, so that we overlap a couple days, I think. I return and then Pete goes out. So all that to say that I don't know that this can be issued prior to me leaving. It's probably something that should have gone off EPHA, I think. But I think we could be in a position in our now fourth week of July meeting to talk about the RFP and see if this board is comfortable with the structure of that, if we want to go to that level of detail, or if you just want me to issue the RFP after the structure.
I'm comfortable with
Yeah, you guys said that you're
going
going to have
go ahead, provided that we have a caveat in there, somebody that works within the Estes Park real estate market. And I know the numbers that comes from Boulder, Collins, that supposedly understand the market here. That is not necessarily. So, a local company that is located in this.
All that to say, I think based on that, we'd be comfortable staff making that decision on broker representation. You all, of course, would be involved in the ultimate disposition if and when we're seeing offer. Yes,
At least on paper, we still have a marketing committee at this board,
we do.
and that's me. So, yeah, I think, both respects, wide open on the RFP, but with parameters and experience in local market and demonstrated experience is very important. And then open it up to the general public. It's not a private sale, it's a publicly advertised, all comers, best, overall bid. And, to the extent I can work with Pete or, I think we get this done in relatively short order. And volunteering as the marketing committee, to be the marketing committee.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to, put the property at Castle Ridge, on the real estate market for eventual advertising and sale.
I think we actually already did the motion.
Did we get the motion?
Yeah, this was all substantive
Okay.
conversation, how to handle the representation of the brokers.
I'm sorry,
No, that's okay. I think that.
I'm sorry, I was asleep.
No,
You had a good talk.
I think the motion was sent to the board, and then it was just a method that I
Of
think.
how to do it.
Yeah, I think you guys have given me a repeat enough direction.
Anything else at this point?
Are we gonna vote on that motion?
Did we go?
You have to vote it.
We've never done it.
Did we vote?
Yeah,
on the
Castle
motion?
Ridge, yeah, the motion.
Yeah,
Was to
Jim.
put it,
Second.
yep, to put it on the
Unanimous.
open market, motion made by
Motion and
Pete,
second, but I don't-
second by Jim.
Like I said,
Oh, did we vote?
we need to vote.
Let's vote on that motion.
I entertain a motion.
No, we have that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Here we go. Anything else for the good of the order? Pete? Sir. Wendy? Jim?
I just wanted to make a quick comment about last night's study session. As a staff liaison, I really appreciated the conversations here, and I really appreciated the discussion that happened with the town board yesterday, and just your advocacy and comments about workforce housing and the role you play. So I've enjoyed working with all of you all, and I'm glad that happened in a public setting the way it did.
Great, thank you. Frank?
Second half, that was a good meeting.
Good, Joe?
Thank you for last night's presentation. It was fantastic. I think it was very clear, walked people through the processes, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate working with everybody here last year. Very rewarding. Thanks.
Thank you, Marie.
I don't have it.
Scott, like Jim?
No, just a reminder that I need to print off a document for you all to sign before you leave.
So we leave. Okay, I have one final comment, and that is to Marty. Thank you for your service to this organization. Thanks for the expertise you brought and your input into decisions that you made through. Appreciate your work. Sorry to be without your expertise and your input. Wish you well with you and the family. And thank you for your work. Appreciate that being said.
Just a question, because I don't know procedurally, when you have a resignation, do you notify the clerk's office or how does that?
We will, yeah.
Okay, because we need to do that to get the ball rolling.
I have 2 letters that I need to get to Scott. One from Brooke and one from Julie. I have a Brooke's letter, but I don't have Julie's yet. I just had an email from her indicating that she was going to no longer participate. So all that will be.
I'll provide the town clerk's office a heads up today that we're expecting these resignations. Once I have them all on the letters, I will send that, and I will kick off the process too.
I just didn't know what the mechanics were.
Yeah, I'll take care of that, and then town staff will come to you guys for an interview committee and all that.
And then, Scott, please put the termination points.
Yes.
So the town clerk knows that it's 20. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time and efforts. We are adjourned. Hang around.